IAG sent me an air oil separator to put on my 86, so I'm going to show you how I installed it. So let's see, how do we do this? Alright, let's start with the coolant first. So coolant runs through this air oil separator, and we've got two ports on the bottom. Doesn't matter, they both run up and meet at the top. So supply and return, however you decide to do it. I reckon when they have the kit ready to go, all these hoses will be cut properly sized, so you're not really going to have a whole lot of choices of where you put them. What I don't have is a heater core or air conditioning, so the way I've chose to run my coolant lines was I took this side off the bottom and ran it into the throttle body. I reckon if when they come out with instructions on how they want you to do it, you'll run both of them over here. One will come on the outside of the throttle body, and one will take the place of this hose right here that's looped. So it'll come from here, go to the air oil separator, and come back from the air oil separator into here. What I've done is I've used the out port on the throttle body to go to the air oil separator, and then I came out of the air oil separator around the back of the engine where most of the hoses are run. And that's this line right here, this line right here, and plugged in. Let's see, down here you can see the clip, and that's where I plugged in to the throttle body. There was a hose that ran from there to that where that's plugged in, so I pulled that hose out and used that whole line. That was hose over here, that was this guy right here. So it used to run from the throttle body under the intake into the bottom of that metal tube. Ended up taking 3 hoses off. These are the 2 Pcv lines. This is the radium stuff that I took off before, and that's some extra stuff we'll get to in a second. So my 2 radiator lines, got it looped from the intake to the bottom of this, out the bottom of this to the metal line over there, where if you got a heater core and stuff, those hoses and everything might be in the way. Now let's talk about I don't know, this line here. This line here comes off the top of this, runs through a Pcv valve, and in the top, this is a skinnier port on that. I think the intended thing was we unscrew, this is the Pcv valve that was in the engine, unscrew it, put in their open valve, and use this hose here to plug into a line there. Well, what they gave me, the nipple was a little too big to fit in the little hose that I used. What I ended up doing, let's see, what do we got? This is the hose they sent me. It's 3/8 hose, and it fit on that fine, but it doesn't fit in that great at all. And so I think that was the intended purpose, was something along those lines. That didn't work out. I did have a little Pcv valve. I did have a Pcv valve from something I had going on before, so I just reused it. I have the original Pcv hose that's factory, I cut down to fit, and then I had to get a worm clamp to make that tight enough to make it work. That's your suction. And your other suction line, so we got our one suction line with the check valve in it coming from the intake. Then we got the other suction line wrapping around and going to the intake, well, air intake tube, your cold air intake, or whatever's here stock, there will be a line for a PCV here. That had a hose on it. Looked like this. In stock form. I think this is the right hose. No, that's the wrong hose. It's this hose. It goes down there, plugs in underneath the air compressor, and then goes into the side of whatever the stock air box is. So we take that out. We run one side of it here to the intake, and one of the ports coming out goes out. I use the top one. It seemed to make more sense with the routing. Top, we go under the intake, and right there, and we plug it into that port. And so that's front of the block. It's pulling vacuum out of the front of the block. It's our, what do you call it, fumes or whatever. The other port, what I use for the middle here, is the one that had the PCV screwed into the engine. Let's see if I can get in there. Yeah, there we go. So I had the line that came from this went straight up and into the plastic intake. We unscrewed that and set this on there, clamped it down. That's kind of a booger to get to because of the Y. I'd like to see the Y moved further up the line, I think. So this is acting as we're pulling, what do you call it? We're pulling a suction out of the back of the block, but it's also wide into the bottom of the AOS, so it's also the drain back. So that just goes into the bottom of the AOS there. Here's a port, simple enough. And that's pretty much it. It took a little longer than I'd like to have seen it done, and that's just because nothing was pre-cut and it didn't really come in instructions. I had to kind of figure it out on my own. Hopefully in the future instructions will be easily read and lines will be pre-cut for everybody that orders these. I mean, it ain't a bad looking unit. They do, let's see, mounting. So I had to get it, has to be mounted high enough, that's your hose right there, for the hose to fall all the way to the drain. So any lower than this and it starts rising, so you're just always going to have a puddle in it. So that didn't seem like that made a whole lot of sense to me. So I had to raise this up until it went to that point. I started on the lowest set of holes, and that was really high. It just looked weird, so I went up one set of holes. So leave the bottom set of holes visible, and that's that. The mount's pretty, stainless, a water jet. I mean, it's sturdy enough. It ain't going nowhere. I was kind of worried that it might be too close to the battery, but nah, take a lot to get into that. So that's that. Hopefully it's a self. Okay, so coolant. You run coolant through the back of this. So coolant line comes in the bottom. You can kind of see it there. There's a cavity here, and another coolant line goes out the other side. So this back plane is, well, heated rather than cooled because it's going to be hot water. They gave us this little plug right here so we can bleed the system. A lot of people not familiar with Subarus. Oh, forget that. Anyway, you unscrew that and you can let water come out of it. You'll let the air come out and eventually it'll be water, and you tighten that back up. You kind of need one of these fancy funnels to hook up on your coolant system to burp it, so you can let the engine run, let it get hot, let the pump cycle water through it, and come over here and crack that little valve and let the air out. Do that a few times till you're satisfied. We're pretty close right here, and yeah, that's that. I dropped my tool. All right, show you. Oh, found it. Car's still on the race trailer. I got another thing to do. We're going to Mid-Ohio next week. So, take that out. And not really done bleeding this. I shut the engine off because it's starting to get dark. If I squeeze this hose over here, there's not enough water in it, is what it is. Use distilled water, fill her up. Yeah, there we go. We get the water level high enough, it'll let that burp on out. That's pretty good flow. That's pretty good flow, yeah. So we go, screw your little doodad back in. It's easier to do when you're not holding a camera or a phone. Water's kind of hot too. Come on, get in there, stupid. Here, I'm gonna put this down. All right, easy enough. Get that started, run her in. It's good that they gave us this. I would like to see this, maybe they can do this in all there, because it's the same air oil separator. When I unscrew this, it should get to a point where I've unthreaded it far enough for it to vent without me having to unscrew this all the way. Right now it's just a plug. And I can see some grooves cutting that plug so it'll breathe, or a hole drilled through it so it'll breathe, so I don't have to take it out all the way. And that's that. So that's the IAG air oil separator installed on an 86. Hopefully this answers any questions y'all have when y'all go to install it. If not, feel free to throw some comments down and ask questions. I'm more than happy to answer them. Thanks for watching.